Good evening sa lahat ng mga nanonood at nakikinig sa Campaign Convos 12th episode, 19 days to go before election. So, onti na lang ang mga episodes natin sa Campaign Convos. But we're here on the 12th episode and yun nga, yung topic namin today ay yung controversial Manila Peninsula Joint Press Conference na nangyari nung Easter Sunday. And alam naman natin na ito yung naging headlines talaga for the past week, not just the press conference itself, but what happened after, di ba? Yung mga reactions ng mga tao, yung mga pagdi-distance ng mga ilang politicians doon sa press con, and really like what do people think of it, what could have been the impact of this really controversial press conference to the candidacies of the people involved. So kaya yun yung topic natin today, and yun, before everything else, magpapakilala muna kaming campaign reporters. I'm Tira Nada, covering the Isko Moreno and Doc Willie Ong campaign.
Hello, ako si Ramo Talabong. Kino-cover ko ang kampanya ni Senator Panfilo Lacson at Senator Tito Soto III.
Hello everyone, I'm Aika Ray and I cover Team Pacquiao Atienza.
Hi everyone, I'm Jairo Boliedo. I cover the campaign of Leo de Guzman and also help in covering Vice President Leni Robredo.
Okay, so bagong lahat, no, si Aika, nasa kotse siya kasi on the road siya to Ilocos, right, Aika?
No, pabalik na ako from Ilocos Norte actually. Yeah.
Oh, so nag-cover siya ng Pacquiao rally dun sa Ilocos. But before no, siguro because our topic nga is about yung Manila Peninsula Press Conference, siguro magandang intro yung parang background and behind the scenes kung ano yung nangyari leading up to it. So, si Jairo kasi, nag-cover siya physically dun sa Manila Pen. So, mamaya we'll hear from him. But siguro kasi, sa mga campaign reporters, ako yung unang nakarinig ng mangyayari yung conference na yun. Actually, nung Wednesday pa before that Sunday, nasabihan na ako ng Isko Camp na, Pia, may special press conference sa Sunday, parang 3 candidates. At that time, it was just Moreno, Lacson, and Pacquiao yung narinig kong pupunta. So, parang interesting yun kasi parang, first time in Philippine politics na magkaka-joint press conference ang 3 presidential candidates parang weeks before election. So parang what's gonna happen? So when I asked ano yung mangyayari, talagang on the get-go, yung sinabi sa akin ng Isko Campos, it would be about their commitment not to withdraw. And they would also be criticizing the Leni Robredo campaign or her supporters and allies for asking them to withdraw and even for taking yung term actually parang raiding their supporters. So alam natin na kasi nangyari na 'di ba parang may ilang mga volunteers from the Isko team that went to the Leni camp, and then yung party ni Ping Lacson dropped him and yon went with Leni Robredo also. So in the eyes of these candidates, 'di ba? Parang they were robbed of supporters. So obviously, these supporters naman say na hindi naman sila punersa to join the Leni Robredo camp. But gets mo, that's the grievance that these candidates are citing. Kaya daw nila kaya sila nagpatawag ng press conference. And at the very last minute actually, hindi sigurado na pupunta si Manny Pacquiao. And maybe Aika, pwede mo ring i-add yun. Paano ano ba nangyari kay Manny Pacquiao? Like ano ba talaga initially yung kanyang thoughts about this press conference from the very beginning?
Ay wait, sorry, sasagutin ko na pa kay Senator Pacquiao.
Kung ano yung thoughts niya when he first heard of the plans for a press conference, parang may misgivings pa siya at first or go na go siya?
Actually, si Senator Pacquiao, sabi niya gusto daw niya talagang pumunta. So, I think yun yung isa sa mga na-misunderstood nung ibang mga tao na nagre-react, at least on social media, yung nakikita natin, no? Senator Pacquiao wanted to go. He was invited. That's the reason why talagang nag-plane pa siya from Jensan papunta dito sa Manila. So yun na nga, no? He was invited by Senator Ping Lacson. That's what he told us. Si Senator Pacquiao actually, parang, at first, the Rappler talked to his campaign manager. Yun nga, di ba, nakwento ni Pia kanina na we actually heard about it a few days before. And sabi ni campaign manager ni Buddy Zamora na parang he doesn't see the point of joining this press conference, especially if you're just going to say na we're not withdrawing. So, yun na nga, we thought na he's not going to go, but then it turned out na he actually wants to go. So pupunta nga siya. And yun na nga, ang sabi ni Buddy to us, Zamora, na it was a discussion among friends. Kasi nga si Senator Ping Lacson yung kanyang, yung nag-invite sa kanya, no? And we have to remember that Senator Ping and Senator Pacquiao are in the macho block ng Senate. So meron talaga silang relationship na, or maybe even friends, no? So there, maybe I can add more later, no? When we talk about more tungkol dun sa press conference.
Mhm. So ano lang, important to note din na sino ba yung may pakana ng press con na 'to. So actually, it's really two presidential candidates who wanted this to happen, who led like the moves to make this press conference happen. At nangyari kasi 'to between Isko Moreno and Panfilo Lacson. Someone in Isko Moreno's camp, I know this person but I cannot say his name, had the idea na, uy, baka kailangan ng press conference na 'to kasi yung si Tito Soto daw, yung running mate ni Ping Lacson, was able to talk to this ISCO camp person and talk about how their candidates are suffering from the impression that, uy, baka mag-withdraw kasi di ba lumilipat yung supports nila. So, they were worried na baka akala ng maraming tao na in danger yung kanilang candidacy. So, they thought, why not hold a press conference just to reiterate that they will not withdraw. And it would be a show of unity and a show of force if they do it together. So, maganda naman yung idea, di ba? Parang, tama, parang to reinforce the troops, etc. So, si Ping Lacson was told of the idea, I think, right before the second COMELEC debate. He was given time to think about it and he realized eventually na, okay yung idea. So, siya pa nag-volunteer to invite Manny Pacquiao and I think he came across Norberto Gonzales in a hotel and dun niya in-invite si Norberto Gonzales. Si Gonzales naman yung nagsabi na, I'll invite Abelia. And Abelia was initially supposed to make it, but last minute, on the day itself, nag-back out siya. Hindi na nila tinanong kung anong reason. But definitely, si Isko Moreno and Ping Lacson were taking the lead on this. And in fact, tao ni Moreno yung nag-shepherd sa press, dun sa Manila Peninsula, yung tao ni Moreno yung nagmo-moderate ng questions from the media. So, siguro punta tayo kay Jairo. I mean, Jairo, kamusta naman yung setup dun sa Manila Peninsula? Like, sino yung mga tao dun? Who were the actors there?
Yeah. Kaya pagdating ko doon, okay naman yung vibe kasi originally, talagang yung ano kasi nila, parang among the presidentiables who were parang poising to join the press con, si Lacson, si Pacquiao, si Norberto, si Abelia, tapos si Isko. Parang sabi ng mga kasama kong taga-ibang network, kasi hindi naman ako member ng ibang Viber group, yung tatlo lang daw talaga yung nagbibigay ng advisory prior to that, which are Lacson, Isko, and then Gonzales. Tapos pagdating ko doon, winelcome ako nung mga staff ni Isko. Pagdating ko pa lang doon around mga 9, marami ng tao, pero mostly mga staff yun ni Mayor Isko. Tapos mga 5 minutes pa lang akong dumating na rin si Mayor Isko, may dala siyang kape, pero hindi muna siya pumasok dun sa venue. I think may parang holding area sila. Tapos yung press, inaasikaso sila ng staff ni Mayor Isko. I think those people are from the media team. So gina-guide nila kami to saan uupo, ganyan, nag-alok sila ng coffee and whatsoever, gina-guide nila lahat ng media. And then after that, nice naman yung mga tao. After that, dumating yung staff yung media team ni Senator Ping. Tapos sabi nga nila, dumating na daw si Senator Ping din, saka si SP, si Senate President Tito Soto. Tapos pagdating ng dalawa, dumating na rin yung biglang nearing to the event around 11:30. Halos dumoble yung capacity ng venue to the point na napuno siya bigla, parang saglit lang kami nawala. I think nag-CR lang ako saglit. And then punong na yung venue. Tapos mostly, I think ay supporters ni Mayor Isko Moreno. Tapos yung arrangement kasi ng Manila Pen doon sa area na yon, parang, di ba, ito yung table ng mga presidentiables, tapos sa baba, originally dapat nandun yung mga vice presidential candidates, tapos sa likod nila yung media, sa right side. And then sa left side, sobrang daming vloggers na mukhang pro-Isko vloggers na nandoon. Tapos parang kasing dami namin sila. Tapos yung ibang media, hindi namin kilala kung sino nandun, but mainly, yung usual na nagko-cover kay Mayor Isko, magkakasama, magkakadikit. Funny part pa doon, naguhulaan kami kung ilan yung darating kasi yung ina-arrange na number ng bangko. Kasi originally, 5 yung bangko sa unahan. So sabi sa amin, 5 presidentials kasi yung dadating, presidentiables yung darating. Tapos tinanong namin, kanino po yung magandang bangko sa baba? Tapos sabi, para nga daw sa mga vice presidential candidates. So originally talaga, ang bilang nila ay 5 and 3. So 5 presidential balls and then 3 vice presidential balls. But nakakatawa kasi para siyang trip to Jerusalem. Parang papalapit ng event. Tinanggal na nila yung 2 bangko sa taas, pati yung sa baba, tinanggal na nila. Tapos eventually, nilipat na lang nila doon sa unahan, naging 5 chairs. So doon namin na-realize na, okay, 5 lang yung darating. Sakala, hindi malinaw kung ilan. And then eventually, dumating na, lumabas na si Gonzales, si si Ping, Senator Ping, si Mayor Isko, tapos si Doc Willie Ong, pati si Senate President Tito Soto. So magkakasama na sila doon sa itaas. So ano pa bang, masaya naman. Originally talaga, ang vibe talaga doon sa presser ay may unity talaga. Kasi prior to that, na-ambush interview namin si Doc Willie Ong, tapos sabi niya, sinabihan daw sila na yun nga, para magkakaroon daw ng unity presser, para daw i-reiterate at mag-step foot sila na, mag-stand yung ground nila rather na hindi sila mag-withdraw. Tapos sabi niya, hindi din siya mag-withdraw, contrary dun sa chismis prior to that day, na lahat ng yung ka-allies nila na vice presidential candidates ay mag-withdraw for SP, for Senate President Soto. So dinay niya yung claims na yon. Tapos during presser, medyo nagka-cut sila ng mga nagtatanong na media people, especially yung staff, I think ni Mayor Isko yung nagtatanong. I think originally kasi we were told na parang we have 1 question each and then we can do follow-up questions. 1 follow-up lang. Pero di pa natatapos yung tanong ko, kaya cut na ako. Ayaw ako ipa-follow up. So hindi ko alam kung bakit. Pero I mean, my question is about sino ba talaga yung kausap. Kasi they were alleging and accusing about the withdrawal talks, but they have yet to give names during the presser. And then after that, yun na, may mga nagtanong na rin. And then the controversial question was from Marlon Purificacion, I think, of a tabloid newspaper. The problem there is, nung tinanong niya yun, parang hindi naman na-cut off guard yung presidentiables, but I think meron pang tinanong something si Senator Ping na totoo bang sinabi yon, ganyan. So, Senator Ping answered, I think, as far as I know, started answering by, if ever sinabi man niya yon, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, naka-ride on na dun yung other presidentiables. And eventually, it turned out it's fake. Even the moment this certain Marlon Purificacion asked that question, we already knew na hindi niya talaga sinabi yun. Kasi for example, in my capacity as co-reporting or co-covering Robredo, I can't remember anything that she said that, or even other stories of other news organizations published that claim. So yun yung mga naganap doon na behind the scenes after that. Tapos nagpakain sila ng mga attendees doon, which happened to be, mostly from Mayor Isko Moreno's camp and team.
Right. Very unfortunate na hindi na-annotate yung part na yun about that question on magkakagulo raw. Sabi na nila ni Roberto na magkakagulo yung Philippines kung hindi siya manalo. So, that was a fake attribution to her. She never said that. But yun, it was kind of like one of the questions that the candidates present really pounced on and has actually been used, right, to even by Marcos supporters to kind of parang criticize or take a jab at Vice President Lenny Robredo. But before we go to that, yung nangyari talaga sa press con, siguro Rambo, curious din kami, dun sa camp ni Senator Lacson, may any clue ba kayo leading towards Sunday na may plano siyang kakaiba? Kasi di ba, is this a usual thing for Lacson to do this kind of press conference? Does it fit his personality to hold this kind of press conference in the first place?
Yeah. Meron ng hints from, of course, nagsisimula na yung mga press advisory dun sa ISCO camp. Tapos pinapa-confirm na kay Lacson sa Lacson camp. Yung mga media personnel ni Lacson, hindi pa sila nagko-confirm kasi humihingi pa daw sila ng details, hindi pa ma-confirm. But then nilabas nila finally yung kanilang advisory ng Saturday. So it's a day before before talaga nag-confirm si Lacson. Itong pag-confirm ni Lacson dito sa press conference na to, hindi naman nakakagulat na rin kasi isa siya sa mga biktima kuno dito sa mga calls for withdrawal. Itong ang kanyang original plan, sinabi rin niya din sa press con, ay gusto lang niya ay joint ambush interview with all other presidential candidates na pinapa-withdraw. Na let's say na hindi tayo mag-withdraw kahit na inaaway tayo sa Twitter or behind the scenes, sinasabihan tayo na dapat mag-withdraw tayo. Ang gusto ni Lacson, klaro na hindi siya mag-withdraw kasi nakukulitan na siya sa mga pagtatanong, pati yung mismong backroom talks na nagsimula October pa lang at siya mismo ay bahagi doon sa backroom talks na dapat mag-unite. Pero siya mismo ayaw niyang mag-withdraw. Yun ang kanyang gustong sabihin na ayaw talaga niya mag-withdraw. Kaya yun ang kanyang pinunta dito sa press conference na to, hindi siya mag-withdraw. Ang nangyari lang sa press conference kung saan napunta yung mga tanungan, nagkaroon ng calls for withdrawal kay Lenny na kailangan din niyang bawiin na hindi ako kasama dyan sa call na yan ha. Tapos yung calls for Lenny na ano ba siya, bahagi ba siya ng coalition with NPA na napasama na rin kasi topic din niya ni Lacson. Itong press conference is, I guess, a long time coming for him kasi hinihintay talaga niya na mga pagsalita siya na hindi ako mag-withdraw at napasama lang si Isko at ang ibang mga presidential candidate, mas unified sila and critical time before the elections, three weeks before it.
So siguro to set the record straight, right? Kasi yung mga nakikinig sa atin, baka we should also answer the very basic question na, mayroon nga bang nagpapa-withdraw sa mga candidates na nag-attend dun sa joint press conference? Like, from what you know, in your coverage of those candidates, what have you heard regarding this? Siguro Aika muna.
Kasi,
Yeah, I'll answer first. No, I recently did a Rappler Talk interview. Baka gusto niyo rin panoorin, guys, sa mga viewers natin today. So, si campaign manager Salvador Zamora basically said na there were people, at least once he was approached para tinatanong siya kung posible ba na mag-withdraw si Senator Pacquiao from the race. So, tinanong ko siya, sabi ko, do you know which camp? Of course, ang sinabi niya, ang logical explanation for that is for the number 2. He didn't name anyone, but sino bang number 2 sa surveys ngayon? Si Vice President Lenny Robredo. So meron silang ganitong klaseng pinanggagalingan. Although si Senator Pacquiao didn't really want to answer the question. We asked him during the press conference kasi yesterday, he was in Ilocos Norte nga, no? That's the first time na nagpakita siya sa media after nitong Easter Sunday press conference. So 2 days talaga siyang hindi sumasagot sa media. Wala siyang statement whatsoever, nothing. So sinabi niya na kung meron man, ayaw niyang sabihin, sa kanya na lang daw. And I think ang isa sa mga aside from that, no, talagang hugot kasi nila is, meron daw mga lumalabas na fake news na magwi-withdraw sila na parang in a matter of hours, magwi-withdraw na daw si Senator Manny Pacquiao. So dun sila nagagalit. Kaya yun nga si Senator Pacquiao, sabi niya, ang pinag-usapan kasi nila, at least ng mga presidential bosses, yun talaga na yung unity na hindi sila mag-withdraw. Kaya niya gustong sumama. So, yun yung kanyang pinanggagalingan.
How about for Lacson?
Kay Lacson talaga matagal na eh. From the start kasi meron talagang unity talks with Lenny na nag-collapse, di ba? First of all, may mga meeting with other senators. Talagang the Senate is a common thread here. At ang sinabi niya, si Senator Franklin Drilon, who is a key person with the Liberal Party and also in the Lenny campaign, nakapag-meet kay Lacson at Soto. Tapos, allegedly, itong sabi ni Senator Lacson, tinuro daw ni Senator Franklin Drilon na si Lenny at saka si Tito Soto na lang daw. At ayaw ni Lacson, hindi niya nakita yun. Kung nakita daw yun ni Lacson na parang nagja-gesture si Senator Franklin Drilon, mag-walk out sana siya. Pero galit pa rin siya kasi nalaman niya belatedly. So, dininay naman niya ni Senator Franklin Drilon. Tapos, meron ding talks for Lacson to withdraw. Latest is itong si former QC Mayor Jun Simon. At kinausap naman natin ng Lenny Camp. Ang sabi nila, hindi to official delegation ng Lenny Camp. Ito yung nangyayari din talaga. May mga kumakausap daw sa mga kandidato. Parang hindi natin alam kung offshoot ba talaga, kung may basbas ba ni VP Lenny. Pero ang sabi nila, hindi naman talaga kasama ng campaign. parang, kasi that's another thing eh, pwedeng mga allies lang ito na hindi naman talaga may basbas pero kinakausap yung mga other presidential candidates, mag-withdraw ka na lang para dito. But that doesn't necessarily mean na ito'y gustong gawin ni Lenny para dito sa mga taong to, campaign managers ni Lenny, gustong ipagawa dito sa mga taong to. Pero si Lacson kasi bilang ano rin, policeman, he loves connecting the dots. Ang sinasabi niya, who benefits the most? Who benefits the most if these people ask us to withdraw? Who benefits the most for cause of withdrawal? Malamang si Neri rin, Lenny rin, malamang meron din yung basbas. Pero yun nga, tinedeny naman ng Lenny Camp. So, yun yung mahirap na medyo makalat yung communication lines nila. Nung simula, nagkikita-kita pa sila eh. Pero ngayon, hindi na. Kaya, I think a product of miscommunication din ito eh. And personal grief, which we can also talk about kasi ang daming nawala kina Lacson tsaka kay Isko Moreno from the Lenny Robredo camp. So it's easy for them to see red at this point.
Right. Kay Isko naman, siguro yung pinaka concrete na withdrawal talks for him that affected him, right, would be the group of Team Orbos, which is Ikaw Muna Pilipinas. And we know that not all of the Ikaw Muna Pilipinas group members naman really did switch to Lenny Robredo, but its leaders did. Team Orbos, Elmer Organio, ito yung mga parang officers nila. And si Team Orbos kasi, sabi niya, yung kwento niya is, nagkausapan sila with Lenny's people during the rallies about the 203 billion, right, claim or the estate tax of Marcos. They held a rally together, like yung mga camps ng iba't ibang candidates to show unity nga against Marcos. They jointly organized rallies in front of the BIR. Tapos doon daw nagkausapan na, uy, if we can unite for this issue, right, to bring down Marcos, why not we unite as candidates, make our candidates see that we have to rally behind a single candidate to oppose Marcos. So, yun yung pinaka-concrete na si Tim Orbos continues to say that they are trying to talk to Isko Moreno and Lito Banayo and his campaign team to maybe consider withdrawing. And totoo naman, like he tried to send a letter, hindi raw natanggap ni Lito Banayo, but definitely may active groups na I guess you could call them allies of Robredo now because they're already switched to Robredo and are in fact dealing with people like Isambayan officers, leaders, talking to Robredo camp. So I guess yun yung pinaka-concrete connection that I could find, that it's Tim Orbos and his group still trying to persuade Moreno, or at least as of a few weeks ago, still trying to convince their former principal to go with Robredo. And siguro as a reporter covering Moreno and siguro yung mga ibang candidates na rin for you guys, diba? Parang we can establish na meron naman talaga silang pinanggagalingan. Like maybe for people out there who think this press conference happened out of nowhere, parang they're making up an issue. We can say na no, they're not making up an issue. This has been bothering and simmering for months already. But I guess yung question is, right, tama ba na i-atake si Lenny Robredo for the efforts of people who may be supportive of her, but maybe she never ordered them, right, to do those things. So I think yun yung main issue na tama ba na pag-initan niyo si Lenny Robredo? So punta naman tayo dun sa nangyari nga na controversial call ni Manila Mayor Isko Moreno of Lenny withdraw. Kasi na-establish naman na rin natin through our previous stories, right, na hindi actually pinag-usapan yun dun sa meetings prior to the press conference. Meaning, everybody was taken aback. Like, they didn't know Moreno was gonna say that. Anong take niyo dun sa, what did your candidates think of that call? Kasi nakita natin, ang dami nag-distance, di ba?
Parang nakikita natin, Pia, yung wala go, Zairo.
Yeah. Go ahead, Drum.
Nakikita ko na talagang parang hindi klaro, di ba? Kasi kinailangan pa i-clarify na hindi ko alam sa kanila, pero ito yung sa akin. Hindi ko alam sa kanila, pero ganitong sa akin. Di ba akala ko ba unity? Pero lumalabas, kung anong sinasabi ng isa, parang sinabi na rin ng lahat kasi nasa iisang table lang naman silang lahat. Kaya after the press con, may clean-up operations na, by the way, hindi ako kasama dyan sa call ni Isko Moreno na mapag-withdrawin si Lenny. Kasi yung kay Lacson talaga, ang pinaka-pinaglalaban niya, klaro to sa kanya, na hindi niya ipapag-withdraw si Lenny kasi ayaw niya mag-withdraw. Yun naman talaga yung ayaw din niya eh. Kasi nung simula, pinapag-withdraw siya ni Lenny, ayaw ko rin ma-withdraw siya. Itong labang ko, kahit mababa yung aking surveys, pinaglalaban ko pa rin to, itong pinaniniwalaan ko, hindi ako nagpapa-withdraw. He really came into that press conference just wanting people to stop asking him to withdraw, to stop
Mm.
the backroom talks. At bahagi na rin dyan yung baggage na
Okay, nawawala si Rambo, but siguro we can ask Jairo muna.
Yeah.
Go.
Oo.
So,
Saluhin lang
Jairo,
natin yung
ano yung body language ng mga tao nun? Nung nakita mong sabi ni Manila Mayor Isko, withdraw Lenny, did you see how they reacted, like their body language?
yeah. Alam mo, yun yung interesting. Kasi unit branding nung presser, nung press briefing. Pero nung presser mismo, halatang after the moment na binasa na nila yung unity statement nila saying na hindi sila magwi-withdraw, parang kanya-kanya sila. Especially when
Mm.
it's mentioned yung Lenny withdraw, si
Mm.
Senator Ping poker face lang siya. Si Senator Tito, the usual SP na parang tingin sa paligid pero parang wala siyang narinig, ganyan. Tapos si Doc Willie, the usual Doc Willie Ong, I mean, plain face. And then si Norberto, wala na siyang reaction. So, ang weird talaga kasi doon pa lang masisignal mo na parang, ha, Lenny withdraw? Pero bakit si Isko lang yung nagsasabi noon? And then, 2 hours into the presser, si Isko lang din yung nagme-mention. As in never, kahit isang beses, I have never heard Norberto or Senator Ping mentioned that. That's why after the presser, we immediately had an ambush interview with Senator Ping, and I personally asked him, Senator, for the record, yung statement ba na withdraw Lenny, collective po ba yun o si Mayor Isko lang? Sabi niya, si Isko lang, sinabi niya naman yun. So after that, nagkaroon na yun na yung pinaka-signal na, yun nga, ano lang siya, calls lang siya ni Isko Moreno na si VP Lenny mag-withdraw. Saka, iba talaga eh. I mean, even sa Unity Talks, yung sinasabi nilang withdrawal talks, although nag-unite or nag-jive yung sinasabi nila na lahat sila ay merong same experience, kapag nagkukwento sila parang hindi coherent, I mean, syempre hindi natin masasabi kung coherent pa or hindi, pero just by the body language, parang iba't ibang tao yung tinutukay nila, na parang iba't ibang time frame, and at the same time, after beyond the withdrawal talks and topic, parang meron na silang sarili-sariling topic or agenda for that presser.
Pero alam mo, if you ask Isko, which I did the day after, kung plan ba yung sinabi niya, kung saan pinanggagalingan, bakit bigla siya nag-withdraw Lenny, sabi niya na he was actually just supposedly reacting to Norberto Gonzales, who was saying that we should replace the second placer, na parang kailangan daw may mas effective na non-Marcos candidate, and it can't be Lenny Robredo because she's not parang gaining enough increases in her numbers to catch up with Marcos. So, and I really rewinded the press con. And in fact, si Norberto Gonzales, meron nga siyang sinabi pala na gano'n. Hindi lang niya sinabi Lenny Robredo, pero parang sabi niya na, the second placer right now is not effective. Kailangan may bagong second placer. Hindi niya sinabi din na Isko Moreno ito or any one of us. But yun, parang basically, yung sinasabi ni Isko was, hindi naman siya parang out of nowhere, Lenny withdraw. He was just like following the train of thought of another candidate. Now, obviously, hindi yan yung nag-come across kasi lahat ng
Yeah.
headlines, di ba, Isko lang.
Oo. Saka, Tia, for context lang, sinabi talaga siya ni Norberto Gonzales na maybe the second placer is not effective or parang is not the one who can beat the first placer daw. Maybe nasa third daw, nasa fourth, nasa fifth. Tapos yung messaging nila on that context ay sinasabi lang naman, ang gusto ko silang sabihin, not necessarily withdraw Lenny, pero si Senator Ping, si Mayor Isko, saka si Norberto, ang gusto nilang sabihin, people should look beyond Robredo. Kumbaga parang wag silang etsapuerahin. Kumbaga wag silang i-sideline. Kumbaga supportahan din sila at tumatakbo pa rin naman sila. Walang word na withdraw or walang word na tanggalin yung second placer. Parang parang palitan yung goal. Palitan yung keyword na gusto nilang gamitin. Parang maybe nasa kanila pala yung mananalo daw. Yun pa yung sabi ni Norberto Gonzales. Maybe wala daw sa first and second placer. Malay mo na sa third to fifth, sixth placer daw yung mananalo.
Oh, let's actually explain that a bit because maybe some people think it's ridiculous for that assertion to be made. And gets ko yun. Parang, bakit mo naman sasabihin na mas effective yung third, fourth, fifth placer when the second placer is precisely in second place kasi siya yung, di ba, next highest survey ranking. Pero siguro kasi, maybe those people saying that belong to that yellow-pink world, the kakampinks, that's the world. But there's another world that you might not know of where there's a narrative, right? True or false, I won't make a judgment, but meron talagang narrative na kung hindi lang tumakbo si Lenny Robredo, mas may chance pa manalo si Ping or si Moreno kasi daw hindi sila as um, mas palatable sila to a wider spectrum of voters kasi meron daw very rabid anti-Lenny sentiment na if in the kakamping world it's anyone but Marcos, there's another world that says anybody but Lenny. So, replete ang DDS echo chamber with narratives and analysis by observers, by Duterte supporter na influencers or online personalities, making this analysis na kung two-way race to between Moreno and Marcos or Ping Lacson and Marcos, the topic would now not be about EDSA and yung political fights ng Aquino Liberal Party with the Marcos camp. It would be about supposedly, right? Like competence, track record, magnakaw versus someone who's wala namang similar baggage, things like that. So meron talagang ganyang parang thinking na, opposition, you chose the worst candidate to fight Marcos because this candidate, i.e. Lenny Robredo, hindi siya gusto ng malaking sector of the population. And then they cite, right, SWS surveys about her low performance and satisfaction ratings before. Obviously, it's wrong to cite that now kasi iba na yung dynamics ng political world kasi we can see that she's really gaining big jump in her survey rankings sa pre-election survey. So, siguro just to give you context na maybe you're wondering, saan nanggaling yon? Like, that's completely, diba, out of this world. It's actually something gaining traction in the DDS world or in the anti-Robredo world.
Pia, may question ako. Yung yung call ba ni Isko, is that really spontaneous? Kasi parang there's, out of all the people na supposedly nag-call for withdrawal, kasi si Norberto Gonzales, binawi rin niya or kinlarify din niya. Kasi listening to the press conference, my understanding is, he's not calling for Lenny to resign, but more of telling the people, maybe look for someone not the number 2. So parang it's not an attack on Lenny, but reframing for the voters na hindi lang si Lenny at mukhang hindi effective si Lenny. And I feel like that set the stage for Isko Moreno to pounce on it na hindi nga number 2 dapat. So siguro dapat mag-withdraw ang number 2. Did the Moreno go into that press conference with the hashtag? Nakita ko rin sa post ni Joaquin kung tama ba. So it makes me wonder, did he go onto that stage looking for the proper time with a withdraw Lenny call? Or is it spontaneous na deserve mo nang mag-withdraw Lenny? Kasi totoo din naman si Isko marami siyang spontaneous moments. So it's also valid na spontaneous. Pero what's your reading?
Unplanned siya in the sense na hindi niya hineds up yung mga other people going into that press con. But planned siya in the sense that even days before that press conference, that was already the prevailing sentiment in his camp. Proven by the fact na may press con, for example, yung Dito Banayo and Ernest Ramel pointing to survey figures na least objectionable candidate daw si Isko Moreno, and based on that, he would have better chances daw of winning against Marcos. And then, like a few days lang before that press conference, mayroon pang sinabi si Isko Moreno when I asked him about his former volunteers call for him to make the supreme sacrifice. May sinabi pa siya na, hindi ako yung dapat magsusupreme sacrifice. Dapat yung candidate na hindi na raw, who isn't growing in numbers, they should make the supreme sacrifice. And then, nung kami ni Bianca Davao of ABS-CBN, we tried to follow up, Mayor, sino po yung candidate na yan na hindi nag-grow? Na stagnant daw yung numbers niya. Sabi niya, wala naman. Pero syempre alam na namin na kung sino yung candidate, right? Lenny Robredo. Kasi nga, they've been citing these figures na Lenny Robredo is supposedly very hated by a certain segment of voters, and may ceiling daw yung kanyang voter preference. So even if we see big increases in her numbers, what Lito Banayo believes is that number can only grow so much. That ceiling is there, and it won't go up enough to beat Marcos. Whereas if it was just Moreno and Marcos fighting, they think Moreno would have had a higher ceiling and bigger chances of beating Marcos. Pero alam mo, tinanong ko si Moreno after, sir, hindi ba kayo concerned dun sa optics ng ginawa niyo? Kasi nagba-back out rin yung ibang tao, like your own vice president is distancing himself from your remarks and the optics is bad. Sabi niya, wala raw siyang pake sa optics. Gusto lang daw niya to be honest and truthful na he wants to stand up for himself kasi tinuturi na raw siyang basahan. So parang yun yung pinanggagalingan niya. I don't know if you believe him, if he really thinks, optics doesn't matter, but that's what he said.
Tia, dagdag ko lang, yung, doon sa observation ni Rambo na kung spontaneous ba or anything, alam mo, pag pinapakinggan mo si Senator Isko, si Mayor Isko, sobrang charming niya kasing person. Tapos ako kasi, parang syempre tayo, majority sa atin ay may background ng communication graduate tayo. As in, sobrang ganda, magaling siya magsalita. As in, objectively, magaling siya magsalita. So yung narinig namin yung withdraw Lenny, akala talaga namin sobrang planned siya. Kasi talaga yung train of thoughts niya leading to that word. And then, ang ganda ng pagkaka-deliver niya. I mean, objectively, objective observation. Ang ganda ng pagkaka-deliver niya na be a hero, withdraw Lenny. Refuting yung ginagamit sa kanya ng supposed supporters ni Vice President Lenny na be a hero, Isko, withdraw, something like that. So, ginamit niya talaga yung line na yon. Tapos habang nandun kami sa sa konting BTS lang din or behind the scenes, habang nakapila kami for the Q&A, pinag-uusapan na namin yung post ni Joaquin na parang, uy, nakita niyo na to. Nag-post si Joaquin, no? Even before Mayor Isko mentioned yung word na withdraw Lenny, we already saw yung post na ni Joaquin na yun nga, #withdraw Lenny.
Curious din pala ako, Pia, no? Sa tingin mo, ito bang ginawa ni Mayor Isko? Parang, yun na nga kasi sinundan niya lang yung hindi effective. So you think this is an appeal to soft voters of BBM in a bid to, beat him?
Fiko, yun yung strategy. Kahit ayaw aminin ni Isko na, di ba, parang it's a strategy, nag-smiley face lang siya when I asked him if it's a strategy. I think that definitely yun yung effect. Kasi kung makita mo yung analysis niya, parang in the past days leading up to that press conference, na hindi naman lahat ng 60% of Marcos's voter preference ratings are hardcore. And meron silang surveys to prove this, like internal or parang surveys that they look at behind the scenes na may segment, I think 33% of Marcos voters want him to return the 203 billion or want him to pay the 203 billion tax. So yung kanilang analysis is, we can still persuade some Marcos voters to join Isko. Kasi hindi naman lahat sila bilib na bilib kay Marcos. Kasi nga, they realize that meron siyang estate tax na kailangan bayaran. So yung kanyang strategy is, baka yung ibang Marcos voters, boboto lang si Marcos kasi ayaw nila kay Lenny. Therefore, we need to make a ploy to appear anti-Lenny. And ito na nga, what better way to appear anti-Lenny than calling on her to withdraw? So Fico, yun yung strategy. If meron naman dito, yun yung gusto nilang intended effect of what he said. Although yung big question dun is, how big is that group? Like, gaano ba kalaki talaga yung DTS vote na pro-Marcos now but can be persuaded to go with Isko? Right? Given that there's so many other factors, like they're thinking of, baka parang they don't like Marcos, but they like unity messaging. Diba? Parang it's still a big gamble on Isko to play that. Kasi marami din tayo nakita, diba, na mga Isko supporters who got turned off by what he did. They call him crass, they call him rude, parang it showed daw his true colors, yung kanyang totoong pagkatao. So, sobrang risky move niya. Like, we know people who liked Isko before, and now they're like, just because sinabi niya yun, parang mukhang ganged up on Lenny na parang to them, wala naman siyang ginagawa, wala naman siyang ginagawang masama sa tatlong kandidato na to. Bakit niyo ginagawang issue? Mukha silang sore losers na alam naman natin na single-digit preference rating sila according to Pulse Asia. So it seems like a last-ditch effort at relevance. And parang, uy, pansinin niyo kami. Parang, and then, di ba, the effect was headline sila. So, di ba, parang, parang are we helping them in their, parang are they the bullies here in fact? So, 'di ba? Anong thoughts niyo? Parang anong impact kaya nito sa candidacy ng kandidato niyo? Good or bad?
Kay Lacson naman kasi flat 2% palagi siya sa mga surveys. I mean, let's be honest and objective about this. Hindi gumagalaw. Kaya na sinabi mo kanina, Pia, na nagpapatama si Isko Moreno, walang gumagalaw, hindi tumataas, may ceiling. Pwedeng applicable din yung kay Lacson kasi hindi gumagalaw yung kanyang ratings kahit na nag-bank on na siya sa debates. Itong press conferences ni Lacson naman, hindi rin masyado mataas ang traction. Ever since we've been covering him, hindi maraming tao nanonood. Pero sa kanya rin kay Lacson, very consistent siya sa kanya messaging na hindi ako aatras. And yun naman palaging sinasabi niya. What Lacson really hope to get out of this is just make it clear and make people stop talking with the people under him. He is one with Isko Moreno in wanting to stop backroom talks, trying to purge and get the supporters of Lacson to go to Lenny. Gusto niyang pigilan yun because that's an internal bleeding that would compromise any candidacy. So those are two things. First is making it clear he will not back out. Second thing is stop these internal operations na fair play naman siya sa elections. Kung merong lilipat talaga, wala kang magagawa kasi may pinili ng iba. Merong mas magandang machinery, may bagong paniniwala ang mga tao during the elections. Gusto niyang tigilin yun pero hindi natin alam kung mangyayari pa ba yun kasi we only have 3 weeks left. Baka kasi last hura na rin to sa kanyang campaign.
Magdadagdag lang ako, yung kay Senator Pacquiao. I think it's the same thing kung ano man yung gusto niyang mangyari. And that's the reason why he agreed to join the press conference. Although, hindi nga siya nakapag-attend dahil nga hindi nakababa yung aeroplano niya due to air traffic issues. So, in a way, yung non-appearance niya actually worked for him. And he himself thinks na parang divine intervention to. This is probably, as what he said, na parang baka dahil yung Diyos pinoprotektahan niya yung mga taong nagsaserve sa kanya, something like that. So sa tingin niya, mabuti na rin na hindi siya naka-attend dito sa press conference na to dahil nga parang biglang nagkaroon ng withdrawal calls. And according to him, allegedly, hindi pa daw niya napapanood yung press con at hindi rin niya alam kung ano yung laman nung manifesto na sinign ng mga candidates. So as of now, hindi natin alam kung sasign niya pa yun or whatever. But definitely nag-work para sa kanya dahil sa tingin nga ng mga tao na at least what we're seeing right now is yung mga umattend doon sa press conference na yon received so much flack. And even if Senator Pacquiao was supposed to go there, parang naano siya, na-save siya from criticisms. And I think it worked for him, although yung question of course really is kung yung sympathy na nakuha niya would actually translate into votes. And yun yung siguro kailangan nating tignan din, yun nga, dahil nag-work yun for him. And I think even if yung mga nagkaroon na rin ng mga after press conference statements na parang allegedly, hindi daw siya dapat pupunta. Yung iba naman sinasabi, pupunta daw siya. But yun na nga, we just wanted to be clear na dapat pupunta siya, but hindi na siya nagpunta dahil nga, hindi na siya nakapunta. And yun na nga, hindi na siya nakapunta dahil dun sa air traffic issues. But nagpapasalamat siya na hindi rin siya nakapunta. And siguro, last thing na lang, regarding dun sa withdrawal calls, si Senator Pacquiao actually, parang na-off din siya, na parang, yun na nga, yung point is dapat hindi mag-withdraw. Pero bakit may biglang nagpatawag na mag-withdraw, di ba? So dun siya din na-off. And sinasabi niya na yung sunod-sunod na patutsada nga ni Mayor Isko Moreno kay Vice President Lenny Robredo, parang para sa kanya, ayos lang naman daw yung basta hindi ka gagawa ng kwento. And I think yung linyang yon is it speaks a lot kasi it says a lot kasi sinabi nga, di ba, dahil nga din doon sa isang question din doon ng press conference na parang yung chaos, yung gumagawa ng kwento, ganyan. So doon siya talaga sobrang na-off. That's for Senator Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah. I-add ko lang for VP Lenny kasi wala si Mara to elaborate but I also cover sometimes VP Lenny and Yodi din. I will give the Yodi side. For VP Lenny, I think unfazed sila nung press ko. Hindi lang I think unfazed talaga sila kasi even prior to the scheduled press mga male candidates, pinost lang ni Vice President Lenny si Jillian na nakikipag-jam sa Ben and Ben. And then after that, they didn't immediately issue a statement even after the presser. Parang after mga 2 hours, 3 hours pa sila naglabas ng statement after Isko called for Lenny's withdrawal. So medyo chill lang talaga sila, tapos medyo unbothered sila neto. Kung sa effect ng campaign nila, I think natuto na kasi sila yung Robredo team na hindi nagwo-work talaga yung any form ng attack. Kasi 'di ba parang early on in their campaign, medyo anti yung na-perceive yung campaign nila as parang super anti-Marcos, paninira, ganyan. So I think ngayon natuto na sila na not totally ignore, but hindi dapat sila magbigay ng so much attention about it. For Calio din naman, who I also cover, ano siya, chill lang siya. Literal na chill kasi naghahalo-halo lang siya during the Manila Pen. Di ba, nag-tweet pa nga siya na parang ang sarap naman ng halo-halo. I mean, mas masarap to yung halo-halo sa South Cotabato kaysa daw sa Manila Peninsula. Kasi nga, originally, Calio was also invited, for the presser, but was uninvited for the presser. Parang magulo nga din yun, yung miscommunication. Kasi may nagsabi na presidentiable, na in-invite daw nila, may nagsabi na hindi. Pero ang official statement ni Calyodi ay hindi talaga siya in-invite. And at the same time, kahit invited kasi siya, among all the presidential candidates kasi, Manny Pacquiao and Leody de Guzman, yung nakikita natin talaga na may respect kay Vice President Leni Robredo. I've been covering Leody de Guzman since October, and never niya in-attack in any form um, si Vice President Leni Robredo. Ibang story si Walden Bello, pero si Leody talagang true to his words na hindi siya maninira o hindi niya atakihin yung mga disenteng kandidato na kalaban niya ngayong eleksyon.
Okay, so pupunta tayo sa mga questions na pinost ng mga ilang viewers. Pero bago nun, I just also like to reiterate na si Aika Ray is on the road. So baka napapansin nyo na shaky yung video niya or may sounds sa video niya. So kasi nasa biyahe si Aika. So may question dito from Gabby Domingo. What's the basis na mataas ang ceiling ni Isko versus Lenny? That assumes most Lenny voters will switch to him, but if Isko leaves, where will his voters go? BBM? Okay, so I'll answer that question kasi I wrote a story, maybe you can check it out, na yung title was Isko Camp saying na Isko has better chances of beating Marcos than Lenny Robredo. So yung sinasite nila doon is yung isang mobile phone survey conducted by Tangere, which is a market research firm founded in 2018, showing, meron silang slide doon listing down yung voter non-preference rating ng ilang candidate ng ibang candidates. So what does it mean? Voter non-preference is the percentage of voters who say they will never vote for this candidate. And yung sinasabi nila, Lenny's voter non-preference rating is 45%, meaning almost 50% of the respondents said that they would not vote her. As in, parang, kumbaga, interpretation is hardcore non-Lenny supporters, parang 45%. Sinasabi nila, dun sa graph na pinakita ng Tangere, Isko Moreno is only has 2% of respondents saying that they would never vote for him. So yun yung kanilang basis na sinasabi na, ko, parang mas maraming may ayaw kay Lenny Robredo kaysa sa dun sa mga may ayaw kay Isko Moreno. Therefore, kung gusto niyo ng totoong, 'di ba, unifying candidate or the candidate who's most palatable to wider spectrum of voters, you go with Isko. That's what they're saying. That's not what I'm saying. That's what they're saying. So, and they're backing that up with the Pulse Asia surveys, which show that Isko Moreno is the top second choice of voters. So, if hindi tatakbo yung presidente nyo, most people would go with Isko and not Lenny. Yun yung kanilang sinasabi. Pero caveat lang din doon, when I asked Dindo Manhit of ADR, Strat-based ADR Institute about that, sinasabi niya na the Isko camp is overthinking these surveys because at the end of the day, Isko Moreno remains the second choice of Marcos voters. Marcos is pushing through with his candidacy, right? There doesn't seem to be any major obstacle unless it disqualifies siya eventually. Pero diba? Go pa rin siya. So, diba, Isko Moreno can only maybe take comfort in that if something happens to Marcos's candidacy, which we see is not a likelihood at this moment. Sige. Let's look for other questions.
Parang Pia, interesting kung wala pa nakapinya. Maganda yung, I'm not sure kung bago ba tong narrative na binebenta ni Isko Moreno dun sa press conference na alam ko na sinasabi niya matagal na parang it's either this or this. Ang tagal na, 39 years na, 30 plus years na itong dynasties na to. Pero dyan sa press conference, pinush forward talaga niya yung agenda na it's either this or this, magkakagulo. But what I'm offering you is peace of mind. Kung ayaw niyo magkagulo-gulo, ako yung inyong piliin. dagdag na dyan yung sinabi yung maling question ng reporter na sabi daw ni Lenny magkakagulo. Tinalunan lang ba niya yun? O kasi parang siya talaga yung pinaka nakagain na most dyan sa lost a lot but also nasolidify niya yung narrative niya na ako yung better second choice, dito siguro papasok yun. Kung second choice, kung kayo hard Lenny or hard Marcos, magkakagulo. Kaya siguro pag-isipan nyo ako para mas peace of mind, para wala nang away.
Fico, yung the amount of attention he gave to yung question ni Marlon Purificacion, definitely ginamit niya yun. Kasi hindi ko alam kung saan galing yung question na yun kasi nga wala namang quote si Lenny Robredo na yun. Pero talagang that quote, that question of Marlon's was really used to amplify that parang that image of Lenny Robredo na she would do anything for the presidency na, di ba, parang magkaka-EDSA 3, which yun nga, part of the narrative ni Isko na ayaw na natin yung EDSA revolution, yung awayan ng Marcos versus Aquino Liberal Party. So, I really think na if your question is parang ginamit ba niya yung question na yun, definitely. I'm not saying na planted yung question or there was some sort of like behind the scenes like kind of staging of that incident. But in terms of strategy, right, Isko Moreno made the choice to answer that question without questioning at all kung yung factual basis ng statement na yun, that purported statement of Robredo's. And usually kasi in other ambush interviews, pag may sinabi kang, Mayor, can you react to this person saying this? Sasabihin niya muna, check ko muna, or talaga ba niyang sinabi yan? Or sino may sabi niyan? Diba? Dito wala Talagang, ginab yung opportunity to amplify that narrative na, pampagulo si Lenny Robredo. So, definitely, that's why in Q&A, right, in press conferences, sana talaga may annotation nun 'di ba? Kasi ang dali-dali for a reporter to kind of change the narrative by simply asking a certain question na may very loaded and parang may pakitunguhan siya, like it goes somewhere that it goes to a narrative that is very consistent with the narratives of other candidates.
May magandang tanong, Pia, dito. Yung planted kaya yung reporter?
Gyro, sa tingin mo? Kasi ikaw yung nandun
Siyempre mahirap sabihin kasi like wala naman tayong factual evidence, wala tayong concrete evidence to prove na planted. Pero I can give my observations. Observation number 1, hindi siya nakapag-mingle sa amin, sa mga journalists covering Isko Moreno and other presidentiables. Kasi even though I'm not originally from the Isko cluster ng reporters, kilala ko yung mga reporters doon. Saka parang makikita, may parang, paano ba? Magkakilala kayo, tapos nag-uusap-usap kayo prior to the event, mag-mingle-mingle kayo ng konti. Kasi as a reporter, parang natural sa atin na makipagtsikahan prior para baka sakaling pwede mag-exchange tayo ng information or ng parang observations, ganyan. My observation number 2, medyo parang inuna lang siya ng konti, I think. Medyo mabilis siya nagtanong or nagkaroon ng access sa pagtatanong. And number 3, talagang unbothered siya after asking that question. Sobrang sigurado siya with his question. And then parang may conviction siya. So parang, sigurado siya na totoo yung sinasabi niya. And observation number 4, Marlon, the same person happened to be, as far as I know, happened to be the one who writes the stories about Robredo linking, red tagging Robredo. Yung mga alleged links ni Vice President Lenny Robredo kay sa mga NPA, ganyan. And then, yun yung mga nag-viral yata na pictures na sa isang front page, siya lahat yung nagsulat. Tapos lahat yon against Robredo or parang red tagging Robredo. So yun yung mga observations ko. We cannot definitely say na planted siya, but we can give observations about how he asked the question that day.
I can add to yung sinabi ni Jairo because I covered the house. I think important to be said, what do we know? Si Marlon Purificacion ay nagpa-publish dito sa People's Tonight. And the People's Tonight is owned by Martin Romualdez. Martin Romualdez is the cousin of Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. So, malalaman natin from that na publisher niya, first cousin ni Bongbong Marcos Jr. And this is a publication na matagal nang nire-red tag si Lenny Robredo, anti-Lenny. Kaya yung mga questions din niya dun sa press conference is as expected. Lenny ba magkakagulo? Tapos yung NPA, may NPA question din siya. So consistent siya doon. The facts can speak that he is a part of a publication which is most linked with Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and with a publication na hindi kumukuha ng side ni VP Lenny, nagpa-publish ng
Mhm.
mga questionable reports. I think that's as far as we can say.
Mhm. I think safe to say that the press conference was used against Robredo and for Marcos. I think nag-benefit dito yung Marcos camp. Kasi ang dami namang nakita mga parang memes na parang, di ba, on Isko saying that, responding to that question of Marlons and Ping na parang, yung nga, backing up this claim na si Moreno is, si Robredo magkakagulo daw, ganun. So, yun nga yung interesting dyan eh. Kasi, kaya dyan lumalabas yung claims na Isko is a secret BBM candidate, 'di ba? Kasi yun, natulungan in a way si BBM dito, si Marcos dito. And the Robredo camp, I mean, in a way, yun nga yung question ko actually, na parang sabi kasi ni Ping Lacson, di ba, this is not an anti-Lenny Robredo press conference. But, right, I mean, how could you not have expected questions like that na parang, na medyo, the questions will go there, will lead to the candidates present talking about their criticisms of Lenny Robredo. So parang Fico, how can he make that claim? Diba, na hindi siya anti-Robredo press conference. Like, hindi ba nila na-plan kasi nag-meeting sila before the press conference, di ba? So parang yung tanong ko, na-plan nila for sure yung kanilang common statement, yung sinay nila, yung binasa ni Isko Moreno. Pero, di ba parang kung strategic ka, hindi mo rin ba i-foresee yung questions ng media na for sure tatanungin sila about Lenny Robredo, about her candidacy, and won't you also expect like someone like Isko Moreno to hijack that press conference to make that withdraw Lenny statement. Even if hindi na expect hindi na napag-usapan yun, di ba? Parang dun na pupunta yung press con eh. Dun na yung mapupunta yung questions eh.
Saka, Pia, kahit sabihin mo kasing hindi naman nagsabi sila Senator Ping and then si Norberto Gonzales, personally, that's not their personal stand on the issue, which is specifically the withdraw Lenny. Yun kasi na-paint eh. Yun yung na-paint sa kanila. I mean, kahit dinenay nila, meron pa rin mga notion yung mga tao na naging anti-Lenny sila, inattack nila si Lenny. Kaya medyo naging convenient yun for Mayor Isko Moreno na hindi lang siya isa na nagsabi nun. Marami kami. So parang kung ibabash man ako, at least tatlong presidentiable kami. Tapos dagdag lang natin, isa sa mga tawag dito, clear winner sa press briefing na ito, si Bongbong Marcos. Kasi in the 2-hour presser, parang isang beses lang na-mention siya ni Ping Lacson, pero never siyang inatake, never na brought up yung 203 billion estate tax and other mga issues sa kanya. Kahit sinasabi nila Senator Ping and then Mayor Isko na hindi siya anti-Lenny, it seemed that way kasi, and that's how people saw it, especially when as you mentioned, when the questions asked are yun nga, yung isa loaded and the rest are really calling for Lenny's withdrawal. So yun yung naging parang impact ng press con.
Speaking of Isko talaga, no, merong question dito ng isa nating viewer, si Faye S. I don't know kung ano kanyang last name. S. Tuldok lang talaga siya. Given the aftermath, this is for you, Pia. Given the aftermath of the press con, do you think Isko has a chance of catching up or is his campaign going down?
I think this incident revealed or just affirmed to me one weakness of his. Kasi when I talk to his inner circle, yung sinasabi nilang weakness, yung isang weakness na talagang paulit-ulit is emotional siya. Meron talaga siyang, like, napipikon siya. And we saw this actually at the start of the campaign period, right? I mean, October when people filed their candidacies, yung nagsabi siya na yellow tard, fake leader daw si Lenny Robredo with fake color. That was immediately after nag-trend yung hashtag withdraw Isko, di ba? So, I really think this is the same thing that happened. Na napikon siya dun sa pag-switch ng ilang volunteers niya kay Lenny, yung backdoor talks, etc. Napuno na siya. And then, sinabi niya yun. But I also think there's a strategic aspect to it na he's angry but he also knows he can use that anger in his strategy, in his campaign, because he thinks he can spin that anger into the anger of the common Filipino na meron ngang sentiment na ayaw kay Lenny. And as personified by the continued popularity of Rodrigo Duterte, di ba? Parang yun yung correlation that he sees in his head. So, do I think his campaign is going down? It's too early to tell, honestly. Kasi even if we hear a lot of kakampings, really angry, really calling him crass, na parang trapo, parang saying that it's derailed his candidacy, I'm exposed to the Isko supporters I see them and I see how this has rallied a certain segment of his supporters. Lalo na yung supporters na we're really not gonna vote for Lenny in the first place. Kasi, they're following his line of narrative na elitista, mata pobre. Kanina nga may ambush interview si Isko na may bago siyang term. Ano yun? Pink bullies. Diba? So, and he's tapping on that sentiment na yung mga maraming kakampings na toxic, na nagka-cancel doon ng mga tao just because they ate in this restaurant na pro-BBM or something. Parang may ganun siyang narrative na spin na I can actually see where that's coming from because I do know of people who have that sentiment against Lenny supporters na they really cancel and they're really very sometimes they're very rude about parang people's opinions. If they're not for Lenny, then they're like canceled already, things like that. Gets ko yun, and he's really using that sentiment to weave that narrative. We know that Lenny Robredo herself is not toxic. She doesn't like parang bullying. She doesn't like withdrawal talks. She doesn't like canceling or using offensive language. But there really are some of her supporters who do that. I mean, we see that online, right? Sometimes we're victimized by it. So feel ko kung sinasabing campaign going down, meron kasing supporters pa rin that like that messaging. Na they even say, laban Yorme, or parang don't surrender, or they're even saying, si Yorme lang malakas, hindi niyo mapapatras si Yorme. So, by saying withdraw Lenny, parang pinagmumukha ni Isko na malakas pa rin siya, na kahit survey lagger siya, meron pa rin siyang K na gawin to, na parang, I don't care what this does to my candidacy, I'm fighting for myself, I'm fighting for my dignity. Yun yung kanyang messaging now. And I think that's working for a certain segment. Yung big gamble lang is that segment big enough to sway votes and to make him win on May 9? Yun yung big question. Hindi ko pa alam yung sagot.
Siguro we can
so
wrap up na
wrap
yan,
na
no?
round. Sorry, 1 hour na pala. Yeah, magandang question yung kay Rambo. What to learn from this? Like, for candidates, yung candidates natin, ano kayang pwedeng take away from this? Nag-succeed ba? And does this ploy have like any place in the campaign?
Maybe I can start kay Pink talaga, no? I think press conferences are a messy thing. It's hard to organize, especially since these are really powerful men who have their own agendas. Imagine putting men with their own agendas on the same table, not the same script. I mean, there's an effort to have a unified script, di ba na, by the way, ito ang aming script, ito ang aming unification statement, ito ang aming gustong sabihin. Pero once it's a press conference, everything's off the table, even that statement. Kahit ano pwedeng tanongin dyan. And they should have been prepared for that. I've covered the police and the military, and that's the most organized press conference that I can think about. Those are the most organized. Kasi meron silang linya at klaro yung command responsibility, who can speak for everyone, who can't speak for their superiors. Dito kasi you have 5 men who are equally candidates with their own sakit sa puso, own baggage, putting themselves on the table, wanting to declare what they want to declare. And then you have a media curious, why are you all here? There are people who have media na meron silang sarili-sariling questions na gustong tanungin. Ano masasabi niyo kay VP Lenny? At doon nag-crumble yung unified narrative, yung unity. Kaya after the press conference, tuloy, hindi naging highlight yung we will not withdraw. Ang nangyari, ang naging headline, yung kay Isko na Lenny, you should withdraw. Especially since this Isko Moreno is so charismatic, nabanggit nga ni Jairo, ang galing niyang i-move yung crowd at saka madami doon sa press conference, siya nag-organize. Ang titingnan natin dito, if a candidate is invited to a press conference, dapat i-consider lahat ng ito. Ano ba ang dapat na script? Pwede ba tayo maging go off the rails? Kung nagkaroon ng miscommunication, ano mangyayari? Sino maglilinis? Who's going to be accountable? It's a messy thing. And yung timing din is this a good time? May pag-asa pa ba? Maybe this is something to be discussed too in a few weeks, few months, few years in the future.
Aika?
Yeah. I agree with Rambo, no? So dito mo talaga makikita na it's very important na since ilang araw na lang bago mag-eleksyon, um, kinakailangan talaga na mag-focus sa campaign. And theatrics like this, parang very risky siya for the
Mm.
candidates. And I think um, it's really a good thing that Senator Pacquiao was unable to go, no? But ano lang to parang sinuwerte lang siya dun sa parting yun. So, um, yun, no place for theatrics for things like this. Like literally days away from elections. Yun yung takeaway dyan.
Ako yung takeaway ko dito is a takeaway about my candidate. Kasi all along, parang I was thinking na Isko Moreno is the ideal candidate. Kasi actor, so marunong siya sa script, marunong siya to project and be consistent. And then I thought the yellow tart comment would just be maybe, an exception. Like maybe that's just one mistake, it'll be forgotten. He won't do it again. He might have learned from it, right? And yun din sabi ng mga inner circle niya na Isko Moreno learned from that, hindi na nga niya inuulit yung ganong comments. But ito, nangyari na ulit. And I'm thinking, wow, he's really like Duterte. Kasi si Duterte, siya yung medyo in a way nightmare candidate kasi hindi mo alam yung sasabihin niya. I remember dito Banayo saying na the time Duterte cursed Pope Francis, nagpapanik yung campaign team niya kasi we have to make him apologize. This will turn off so many Catholic voters. And yun, parang Isko Moreno has the same, I don't know if it's a weakness or a strength, or I mean, it's just I think it's a liability to the campaign team when your principal will say something so strong but also so risky na hindi on board lahat ng tao, even his running mate was not on board, and you can see the effects of this down the line, like in the ground, yung mismong impact sa campaign na there's for example a local government official who was supposed to receive Isko Moreno, but because this person is pro Lenny, kinancel muna kasi baka magalit si VP Lenny dun sa 'di ba, accommodate kay Isko Moreno a day after the withdrawal Lenny call. So there are real consequences to these kinds of outbursts, and even if they may have a strategic value in the long run, they're so risky that you can't also possibly predict the negative consequences of that remark, right? Like the morale to your campaign team na they're trying to make a consistent messaging of unity, and not unity but parang walang away, di ba? Hindi ako toxic, ayoko mang-away. Pero ito, di ba, hindi ka ba nang-aaway kay Lenny Robredo na pinapa-withdraw mo siya? Hindi ka ba nagiging hypocritical by calling on her to withdraw when you're deploring attempts to make you withdraw? So, di ba, parang how do you fix that messaging? You're just gonna leave it to your campaign team to parang, di ba, absorb na sila yung mag-clean up ng mess mo. So, yun yung interesting dito na wow, he's more Duterte than I thought. Ayun, so si Jairo, ayan. Jairo, ikaw may takeaway ka ba? May insights ka ba dito? Or
Yeah,
lessons learned?
I think yung lessons learned dito for VP Lenny is or anyone na magkakaroon ng unity talks or withdrawal talks man yun, especially unity talks, dapat malinaw in the beginning yung messaging nyo. And at the same time, dapat magkaroon ng streamlined messaging. I mean, as much as possible kung meron mang mga ganitong pangyayari kasi hindi natin alam yung absolute truth dito eh. Meron ba talagang negotiator? Official negotiator ba yon? Or baka supporter lang, baka ally lang. So next time siguro, maganda for presidentiables to talk to their allies na huwag magkaroon ng door negotiations in any form kasi somehow it also affects yung yung mismong candidates mismo, even good intention naman sila. It does not only affect yung candidate na sinusuportahan mo, but also the other party na kinakausap mo kasi pwede siyang magbigay ng hindi magandang message or ng magandang pagtingin doon sa end na yun. So parang double-edged sword siya, especially when crucial na yung times. Ito yung malapit tayo sa home stretch ng elections, which is less than a month before elections. Mas crucial siya at mas malaki epekto niya eventually doon sa both parties.
Alright. So maraming salamat for joining us for this 12th episode ng Campaign Convos. I'm sure marami pang drama na mangyayari dun sa 19 days we have ahead of us until Election Day. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.